Hi everyone, welcome back to an SRS Science YouTube video. Today we're going to be focusing on Key Stage 3 respiration. Now let's take a look at our objectives today. Our first objective is to know what respiration is and how it occurs. We need to understand how anaerobic respiration differs from aerobic respiration. And finally, we need to be able to identify factors that can affect the rate of respiration in an organism. So first things first, what is respiration? Respiration is a chemical reaction that occurs in all living cells. Now this does include both animal and plant cells, but is not limited to those, as you'll hear this occur in nearly all living organisms. Now a very big misconception is that respiration is the same as breathing. It is not. Gas exchange is required for respiration to take place, as it uses oxygen and a sugar known as glucose, and it will release another gas such as carbon dioxide. So this is where that misconception can be built up, as you need oxygen and you release carbon dioxide, but it's not the same as breathing. The two types of variation that we're going to be focusing on today are aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. And the reasoning behind its importance is that energy is required for every single life process a living organism needs to survive. Nearly everything requires energy, and it isn't free, it needs to be produced and it needs to be released. To be classified as a living organism, the organism needs to be able to respire. So let's get started with aerobic respiration. So when we break down the word aerobic, it comes from Greek origins, and it helps us to understand why it is classified as its own form of respiration. Aero means air, and bic originates from bios, meaning life. So essentially what we're looking at is air life. But unfortunately it's not as simple as that, because air is made up of a lot of different compounds or elements. So as stated, air would be too simple. Now you have to know that oxygen is required for aerobic respiration. You will not get a mark for saying air. Now this does occur in the mitochondria, which is an organelle found in cells. It produces much more energy compared to anaerobic respiration over a longer time. This is an image of the mitochondria. You may typically see a joke in science or a meme saying that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and this is important to understand why it is so, because this is where respiration will take place, and this is where energy will be released. When looking at respiration, it's important to know the equations, both word and chemical. Glucose plus oxygen. Now these are our reactants. These are the two substances that will be reacting together. And they will form carbon dioxide and water. These are our products. These are going to be produced from this chemical reaction. Now the top line, so glucose, oxygen, carbon dioxide and water, this is our word equation. And along the bottom we will see our symbols. Now these are already balanced for you, and if you'd like to learn more about balancing equations, please feel free to have a look at one of the other SRS Science YouTube channels in the chemistry section. Anaerobic respiration. I've placed emphasis on that "an" because it's the only thing that's changing in the word. Now again, that one slight change will change its meaning, as "an" means without. So we're essentially saying without air life. Anaerobic respiration produces much less energy than aerobic, but it produces it much quicker, so in a shorter burst of time. Anaerobic respiration, it occurs in the cytoplasm of cells that require the energy at the time and produce lactic acid, which can lead to cramps. Now if you've experienced cramps, you know that they can be quite painful. Thankfully, the equation for anaerobic respiration is much simpler. We're still using glucose, our sugar, but we're just simply producing lactic acid. Again, the equation has been balanced. Anaerobic respiration can also occur in unicellular organisms, and the most common one that we will see is yeast. This process, however, is called fermentation. Now, you may have heard of this word before because it does have many uses, but we're going to be focusing on the equation first. Again, our sugar is glucose. Now, this will produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. Now, when you've learned about health of the human body, you may have heard of ethanol before. Now, this is used in alcoholic beverages. So we will use that ethanol to brew forms of alcoholic drinks, such as beer, and also use it in the making of wine. Whereas the carbon dioxide can be used in cooking. So examples, making bread rise. If you've ever made a loaf of bread, you'll know that you need to use yeast. And what this yeast will do, it will release the carbon dioxide as a gas can expand, and it will cause the bread to rise. Factors affecting respiration. Now, looking at our objective, we need to be able to identify factors that can affect the rate of respiration in an organism, and it's important because this is a higher level concept. So please feel free to pause the video at certain stages, go through, and relearn what we need to do. So, as respiration is a chemical reaction, there are many factors that can affect the rate at which respiration occurs. To keep respiration at its optimal rate, now optimal means the rate at which it produces its product at maximum efficiency, catalysts will be used. Catalyst is a term that you may be familiar with when studying enzymes. Now, what catalysts do, they either speed up or slow down a chemical reaction to help it keep at an optimal rate so we can produce as much energy that is needed or is in demand. So we're going to be focusing on some factors that are important in cellular respiration in the human body. Notice how I'm saying cellular respiration, as you can see stuff as internal or external respiration, and we're focusing on cellular respiration. So first one's first, temperature. Now what's important to know about this graph is that it says number of bubbles. This will typically be seen when studying plants for their rates of respiration, because when submerged underwater, we know that aerobic respiration produces carbon dioxide, which is a gas, so bubbles will be seen. Let's describe the trend that we see on the graph. So, as temperature increases up until 30 degrees, the rate of respiration also increases. Now, I know it doesn't specifically say rate of respiration, but remember, carbon dioxide is produced, which would be seen as a bubble underwater. So we know that if carbon dioxide is produced, respiration is occurring. Now, this doesn't just increase and increase and increase. So we have to talk about the other trend that we see in the graph. So from 31 degrees Celsius, the rate of respiration decreases. You may typically see questions that will ask you just to describe the trend, or ones that will ask you to explain why this is happening. So the enzyme that is working as a catalyst begins to denature. Now again, another very common term that you see when studying enzymes, and this simply means that it gets broken down. Now if the enzyme, the catalyst, has been broken down, the chemical reaction cannot continue to work at its optimal rate. Now this will reduce the rate of respiration. So these results and graphs, they can commonly be seen in GCC experiments when investigating plants. However, there will also be questions that you will see in relation to humans. But what's important to know is that our optimum temperature is different. Our optimum temperature in the human body is roughly 37 degrees. So we'd see a different trend. Oxygen concentration. We know that oxygen is another reactant that we use in respiration, so it's something that we can measure and see how it affects the rate of respiration. So, looking at our graph, we're going to roughly estimate that this is 1.5 to 2%. We'll say 1.5. Now, up until 1.5%, the CO2 production decreases. Now remember, it doesn't specifically say rate of respiration. We know that CO2 production is dependent on respiration, so we can gather that the rate of respiration does decrease until it reaches roughly 1.5 to 2%. Now, after that, the rate of respiration will begin to increase. Now, it will begin to increase until it reaches its maximum efficiency and it will begin to plateau. We can see from the trend of this graph that it does not look like CO2 production is going to decrease anytime soon. However, what will happen and what we're expected to see is a straight line continuing. This means that it has reached its plateau, so that is maximum efficiency, and it cannot produce any more carbon dioxide at a higher rate. This is not necessarily a bad thing, it just means that it has reached its limit. Now we're moving on to the summary questions. I've separated them into standard demand, medium demand, and high demand, increasing in difficulty as we go along. Feel free to pause the video each time and attempt these questions after I've read through the questions, and we'll go through the answers after. So let's have a look at the first question. Respiration can happen aerobically or anaerobically. Respiration transfers energy from glucose. Now simply what we needed to do was draw one line from each type of respiration in human cells to the correct information. I know you may not have this in front of you, so feel free to just write them out in your books. So the type of respiration in human cells. We have aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration, and we have information produced. What I'd like you to do is match up each type of respiration to one piece of information, because as we can see in here it says draw one line from each type of respiration. If you draw more than one line, you will not get the mark. Question B. The table below shows the amount of energy released by aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Suggest why human cells might respire anaerobically even though only a small amount of energy is transferred. Feel free to pause the video and give these a go. Great, let's go through the answers. So first thing, aerobic respiration uses oxygen. Remember, when we're breaking down this word, it means air, life. But it's not just as simple as air, because air is a composition of a lot of different elements and compounds. So we have to be specific, and we know that it uses oxygen. Anaerobic respiration, however, produces lactic acid. Now lactic acid is associated with cramp, so it's always a nice way to remember which one's which. Produces ethanol. We know that it cannot be this answer, as this is used in unicellular organisms such as yeast and is instead called a process called fermentation. Uses carbon dioxide is wrong, because we know that the products are oxygen and glucose. Carbon dioxide is a product. The answer here so suggests why human cells might respire anaerobically. First thing, if not enough oxygen is present, then cells will begin to respire anaerobically. Now, more energy may be required for a quicker burst of exercise, such as a sprint compared to a long distance run. So that's why they may respire anaerobically, because they need that energy, in a much shorter time frame. Medium demand. When looking at harder questions for respiration, you'll typically see that the symbols will be included, and you'll see the equations occur more frequently. Feel free to pause the video and have a go at the questions on the screen. Great. So looking at the first equation, complete the two spaces to balance the chemical reaction for aerobic respiration. I know that balancing an equation can seem tough, but hopefully you'll go away and look at the video. But we'll go over a nice little trick that you can use to remember how to balance aerobic respiration. So, apart from glucose, every other compound in aerobic respiration will use a 6. So we'd have 6 oxygens, 6 carbon dioxides, and 6 molecules of water. Now, naming the substance with this formula is glucose. Now, it does say in the answer here we can allow fructose and dextrose. These are just other sugars, but more commonly will be seen is glucose in your questions. Name the structure in the cytoplasm of our cells where aerobic respiration takes place. None other than the powerhouse of the cell, that will be the mitochondria. Finally, summary questions, higher demand. The reason why this question is high demand is because it does not specifically state any words to do with respiration, so you kind of have to think outside the box. Let's look at the question. So the graph shows the rate of blood flow through different organs at rest and during exercise. So we have blood flow in centimeters cubed per minute, and we have different organs. Now, not only this, we have two different categories. The lighter coloured bars are at rest, and the darker coloured bars are during exercise. Explain why the blood flow to the skeletal muscles increases during exercise. Give this a go and see what answer you come out with, as we're going to go over the answers shortly. Good job. Hopefully you found that tough, because it is challenging. So, although the answer may seem very simple, it's not, because you need to link a lot of things together. So first things first, when comparing skeletal muscle at rest and at exercise, we know that when you're exercising, you require more energy. Now, if you want to be very specific, you could say for contraction. Now, when we require more energy, we have to think back to our rates of respiration. And that goes back to this point here. So increased respiration. This word increased is very important, as if you just say for respiration, you're kind of implying in your answer that we don't respire when we're resting. We certainly do respire at all stages throughout the day. It's just when you're exercising, you're respiring at a much higher rate. Now, because of that demand of increased respiration and increased energy, we need more oxygen and more glucose. So you'll typically see when people are exercising, they are breathing faster. But remember, breathing is not respiration. The breathing will be supplying the oxygen but releasing carbon dioxide too at a much higher rate. Thank you very much for sticking through the lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment below, and feel free to check out all the other SRS Science YouTube videos.